My name is Arrington. I'm the U15 head coach for DC United Academy. I currently live in Rockville, Maryland, just outside of Washington, DC, which is where our training ground is at RFK Stadium. I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, not far from Washington, DC, so I'm very much a local. I'm born and raised here. I grew up playing soccer since I could walk, even before I could walk. I remember my old babysitter holding my arms up and walking me around the house, and I would just be kicking a ball. So I think my obsession with the sport started very early. But growing up, I played all kinds of different sports. I definitely played soccer more than baseball or basketball or anything else. It was definitely my passion. But I was somebody who I was very competitive, and anytime there was an opportunity to play a game, I was always like ready to go. I played soccer all the way through my childhood, from I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, all the way up through high school, club soccer, college soccer, and then also for a time in Italy as an amateur player over there for a number of years. So after my career ended, I came back, I started coaching, and here I am today. I think there was a feeling or a desire to stay around the game for as long as I could. I think even while I was playing, I knew I wanted to stay related to the sport in some capacity once my playing career had ended. But I actually started coaching more or less by accident. It wasn't something that I was seeking out. When I'd come home from Italy and playing over there, I was still seeking out opportunities to either play here domestically, and also pursuing some conversations that were being had abroad or abroad in some various other countries. But in the meantime, I was back home, I was training, I was working, I was trying to make some money. And one of my former coaches, who I grew up playing for, a guy by the name of Lance Van Winter, he contacted me, and he was coaching some young teams in the area at the time, just some recreational teams for fun. And he was moving on to join another business. And he asked me, he was like, "Hey, listen, I heard you're back in town. Would you like to take the 2 teams I have, just some young guys playing for fun, make a few bucks, just something to do?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." I said, "Okay, fine." So that was my first entry into coaching. And it was actually, I think, refreshing in some ways, because I didn't come into coaching at some really high competitive level. I came in at a very recreational level, kids just having fun, wanting to be around each other, be friends. And I think it helped me kind of reset and calibrate where I was, having come from the last 15 years of just high level soccer every single day, high intensity, trying to make it to the next level, so on and so forth. That helped me kind of reset. And that was the beginning of coaching for me. That really sparked a passion for me to continue and move forward with it. Well, I think I think it can be a difficult transition for anybody. And I know, at least for me, I think there were 2 parts of the transition. One was leaving the space of being a player and coming to the realization that you were done playing, and that you could go play for fun, but you're not playing to try to make a career anymore. And that was very difficult to come to grips with. And I still remember it to this day, the moment I realized that was going to be my reality. I was training at a field with one of my old coaches. It was just him and myself and a few other guys. And I remember I had taken on a shoulder injury, and I had tried to come back maybe just 2 days later, trying to push through and really force the issue. And I remember making one movement, and the shoulder went again. And I just had to stop and walk away from the session just by myself for a little bit. And I realized, this is it. This is over. You need to move on and find something else. And fortunately, coaching came kind of briefly afterwards, and was a nice way to transition smoothly to stay around the game and start coaching. The second piece of that was, once I became a coach, I think it became important for me early on to understand that it wasn't about me, and that I couldn't spend my coaching career talking about myself and talking about things that I had done in my playing career, because it didn't matter. Nobody cared, right? I could use those experiences in helping those kids from what I learned. But if I walked around talking about myself and say, "Oh, that's not the way I do it," or "You should do it the way I did it," or "When I played, I did it this way," it was a waste of time. So I think the transition in each of those realms were difficult, but equally important in kind of forming who I guess, started to become as a coach. It makes me think of I guess the ideology of basically better people off the field become better players on the field. And so I think, tying to your question, I think the importance of it is your job is, of course, yes, you want to teach kids these skills, you want to make them better players, you want them to understand the game. But at the end of the day, you have very little control as to whether these kids are successful or not, as to whether they grow and get better and become the next Messi or Ronaldo or something of the sort. You have very little to do with that. And where you have a larger impact is in just setting these kids up for success in life, because we all know that none of them are going to really make it pro, maybe this many, right? Or maybe make it to the next level. It's very rare. But what all of them are going to do is that they're going to go off and they're going to work someday, and they're going to have families, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to be employees or business owners, or who knows. And what your job is to set these kids up for success in life. And that means teaching them how to deal with failure, teaching them how to deal with success, teaching them how to work with others, teaching them how to handle themselves and be mature and act within the team, to be a leader, all these different attributes and values that, we go to any environment in our lives, family, friends, business, and we see those as important. So I think that's our job, especially with younger players, is building that foundation to make sure they enjoy what they're doing, they're comfortable in the environment they're in, they're learning important values and skills that they can take with them into any aspect of life outside of playing. And I think at the end of the day, if someday they end up on TV playing in the Champions League final, we can sit there and be proud that we were a part of that. But I think we're equally proud when we see somebody who grows up and they call you and they say, hey, I had my first kid, or I have a new job, or you were a part of this process. That's equally as important. There are different ways. I don't think there's one general brushstroke for everybody. We can't treat every player the same way. Each player responds to different stimulus. Each player responds to different communication or different styles of learning. I know myself, when I was growing up, if a coach yelled at me, I was done. I had no interest in working with the coach anymore. I lost respect for the coach. But the coaches who would come and speak to me, who would treat me like an equal, who would treat me like an adult, those were the ones who I really responded to. Those are the ones who I felt, okay, I'll run through a wall for this person. So I think in terms of motivating players, you have to find exactly what the connection is with each player and what they respond to. Some players are going to respond to when you call them out in front of the team and challenge them very directly, and other players, they're going to crumble in that environment. So I think motivation comes from finding exactly what the chord you have to strike with each player is. Some it's having a conversation with, some it's challenging them to better themselves, some it's challenging them against other players, some it's being really hard and stern with, and some it's just putting your arm around. So it varies. I think it takes time. It takes experience. I've had players that I've worked with, one, for example, who plays for me currently, who I remember when I came into the team about 9 months ago, that I was told had a bad attitude. I was told he was lazy. I was told he didn't work hard. He wasn't motivated, and all these different things that were very negative connotations towards him. And I didn't know the player yet. So in some ways, I almost felt it unfair that I was coming in with already this idea of what this player was, without getting to know him myself. So the first 2 weeks, I just stayed back and I left him alone because I wanted to see who he was and how he operated within the group. And after a couple of weeks, I started to develop my own opinions about him. And I felt what was being asked of him was almost unfair, right? I felt what was being demanded of him wasn't just. So what I did was I pulled him aside and I talked to him and I said, hey, listen, clearly your teammates hold you in a certain way. They see you as a leader. They value you. You've proven yourself to be that here. But how you want to be, or how you want to act, and who you want to be, and what kind of leader you may or may not want to be, that's up to you. And I told him, I was like, listen, I don't I care, but I don't care, right? You have to be who you are, and you don't have to fit in sort of inside of any sort of box that we create for you or that society creates for you. I just want you to go and play. And I do want you to understand, however, though, that your teammates, they look up to you, and you can do with that what you want. And understand that the way you communicate with them, the way you lead them, the way you guide them, it matters. So I said, that's it, no problem. I didn't want him to think I was trying to come down on him or tell him who to be. I wanted to give him the space. And now he's somebody who I've seen over, the time I've been with the team. He's grown, he's blossomed, he's laughing, he's enjoying training, he's yelling at guys to be when he needs to be stern, and he's calming guys when he needs to bring organization and structure to the group. And you're just seeing him really grow and develop, not as, let's say, a player technically and tactically, but as a leader, psychologically and mentally. So maybe I kind of went off in a different direction than your question, but that's what you got me thinking about. Was sometimes you just have to give players the space and the trust to be who they are. Yeah. I've certainly have experience with that. With teams and players, I remember that I've had previous to the group that I have now. Some players who, I think even when you felt like you were connecting with them and you were getting through to them and making progress, something else would come in and set them back. And that can be their home environment. That can be stuff that's going on at school. That can be a lot of things that are just out of your control. And I think eventually what happens is you get to a point where you have to have a very honest conversation with yourself and also with the player. And you have to say, listen, this is your reality. This is your life. And I'm trying to do everything within this environment because I only see you, this many times a day and this many times a week. I can only do so much. You have to help yourself, and you have to drive this bus, right? And it's unfortunate, but some kids take advantage of that. Some kids take ownership and they find a way to make things work, even if they face difficulties at home or at school or with their friends or family life. And others just get sucked up in it and they can't get out of it, or they can't get out of their own way. And it's, I think that's extremely difficult to handle as a coach, because you want to, you're in an environment as a coach where you put all the cones down, you organize the session, you understand what the team looks like, you're in charge of everything. You can structure and organize, you can tell one player you're in, the other one you're out, you're in charge of everything. But once they leave the field, you have control of nothing. So it's almost a helpless feeling where you're like, I'm trying to do everything I can, but I can't help this kid. I think that's extremely difficult. It is very much a helpless feeling. And maybe to answer your question more cleanly, I think the only thing you can do is also yourself ask for help and try to find more resources to help those players and kids get every opportunity possible to be successful. Yes. I think the short answer is yes. I think we all see players, athletes, soccer players who we just see unbelievable talent from, and we're like, wow, this kid could really be something special. This kid could go do big, amazing things, but he's not motivated, or he's being distracted by other things, or he doesn't want to work hard, or so many other factors. And it's almost unfair of us to put that burden on a kid or an athlete, because again, we see this potential, we want to see it realized, but who are we to say, right? Who are we to say, oh no, Alex, you're very good at soccer, like you need to keep playing. But you say, I don't really care. I'd rather go make music. I'd rather go do art or cook or something like that. You're like, no, but you're good. You have to play. But why? Okay, go play for fun. You maybe you decide that for you it's better just you play with your friends on the weekend and that's all you care about. Who are we to decide? Oh, okay, no, you should do this, right? It's up to you. And I think that's maybe the piece that we maybe need to learn how to realize more effectively, right? It's not just the talent that a kid may have, talent being defined as, oh, he's a good left-footed player who can dribble and turn and he sees the game and he scores goals. But talent I think is also psychologically and mentally being strong and capable of carrying to the next level, of pushing themselves further. So, maybe our mistake is looking at what we define talent as. And if we say, oh, Alex, you're a very good left-footed player, maybe that's not the important piece. What would be more important if you were driven and focused and motivated and hardworking and all these other things, and maybe needed improvement on the technical and tactical part versus the opposite, where maybe you're not so strong mentally or motivated, but very strong technically and tactically. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's maybe it's not seeing talent as wasted, but us as coaches and leaders need to recalibrate how we define talent. I do, and I think coaches themselves run the risk of burning themselves out. I think we all, players and coaches alike, um, we need to take time to step away from the game and to take a break and to just kind of reset and recharge, just like a player would do after a game, right? That we ask players the day after a game to do nothing. We just want you to rest and sleep and eat and recover and let your brain and body relax, and then we gradually reintegrate them back into training, right? This whole process of periodization. But I think we also, that's just looking at a week or a few days, but we look at the span of a whole year. We typically only really consider the physical load that's being put on athletes, right? But I think what you're getting at in terms of burning out is the mental load that's put on everybody involved. And I think when we don't manage that mental load appropriately, meaning we don't give time for the brain and mind to just relax and de-stress, what ends up happening is tensions raise, guys lose focus more easily. Maybe we're not as strong mentally when we need to be, and we just need to take a step away to just take a deep breath and relax. And I think the more and more in this day and age we talk about mental health, which is a very important piece. I think burning out and mental health are probably two things that coincide very cleanly. And we need to make sure we have time to just take breaks, right? I mean, next week we have a spring break here in the US, where in our area, all the kids will be off from school. They're going to hopefully go away for vacation for a week. And I already have players asking me, hey, what can I do? Can we train? No, you're doing zero. I want you to go just sit in a park for a week or go to the beach or something like that. I want you to do nothing. And I just think that's massively important for everybody involved, so we can do, when we are doing our work, we can do it at the highest quality possible. I'm not sure there really is a way to measure it per se, or a way to really know. But I think what you can only hope is that you're having an open dialogue with your athletes, and that you're having honest conversations, and that you've created a space where they can communicate these things to you. Just as they would hopefully feel safe enough to say, hey, my hamstring is hurting, or my foot is hurting, or my back is hurting, and not feel like that they're going to be maybe attacked or judged in any way, shape, or form. You want players to feel safe in that environment where they can have those communications, that they trust you and you trust them, and they know that they'll be managed appropriately. I think it's the same thing psychologically. I think it's the same thing where if a kid comes and say, hey, listen, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm exhausted, or anything of those effect, they know they can bring that to you, that you will address it appropriately, and that they'll be okay. And that they also won't be, cast out for something like that. I think there are also maybe signs that you can look for as you get to know your players better and better. You may notice certain days, okay, that kid he's acting a little strange today, or he's a little off. Maybe that's a chance for you or one of your assistant coaches, just like, hey, pull him aside and let's just have a chat and see how he's doing. I think communication is really the best way to manage that, and hopefully you've created that environment to facilitate it. I think the biggest one that we can't avoid is social media. I think it's the pressure that is being put on these kids from a young age is bigger and maybe more apparent than ever. Unfortunately, in my opinion, everyone has a voice now. Everyone has a platform. It's good and bad, right? I mean, it's good because people can express themselves, which is fantastic. But I think and many times it's utilized the wrong way. Sometimes you have young players who are being criticized or being pressured by outside sources, parents, fans, friends, colleagues, competitors, whatever it may be, and they're having these unrealistic expectations put on them, not just as athletes, but also as just kids, as people. Um, I think there's also the danger in terms of how much they're exposed to in terms, again, of social media, that they feel that they have to act a certain way to get attention, or they have to be a certain type of person or player to get more likes, to get more reposts, retweets, whatever it may be, to get more attention again. And I think the communication needs to be like, you don't need to do that. You need to be yourself. You need to focus on what your unique pathway is. You don't have to do it any way that anyone else has. And you need to more or less write your own story. So I think that pressure is a very real thing. And I think it's still something that, the generation that is coming up now, they've literally lived with it since they were born. Whereas, my generation, I'm 32 years old, we more or less kind of came into it. Social media and these things kind of came to the fore when I was maybe in high school and college. So we're still figuring out how to deal with it and how to manage it appropriately, where these kids are literally living in it from the day they're born. So I still think there's a lot to be figured out about it, and many ways to figure out how to best manage it and make sure that these kids are doing, handling it in a safe and thoughtful fashion. I have a general idea of what I believe, but I think also we've seen athletes who have come from parents who are really, let's say, overbearing and intimidating and direct, and have maybe molded a kid into being an athlete who maybe acts out and finds success that way by maybe facing this difficult, challenging environment and finding a way to be successful from it. And then we've also seen players who have been successful from parents who are hands off and not involved, and they leave the kid alone, and the child leads everything in terms of their athletic development. So I think you've seen success in both realms. So I can't say one is better than the other, but I mean, I certainly have my opinions where obviously I would prefer parents who are out of the way, who let the child lead their own development, who let them use their passion and motivation and desire to push themselves forward, and push themselves to higher levels. And I think the parents should just be fans and facilitators. They should come to the games. They should applaud their kid. Obviously they have every right to give their opinions and their ideas of how the kid should do things, but at the end of the day, it should be the kid picking up the phone and calling the coach, or the kid writing the email, or saying, hey, I want to try to play for this better team, or I want to try to play at a higher level, not the parent pushing the kid along, right? So those are my opinions. Well, I think it's unique in the US that we have, compared to the rest of the world, how important our university and college system is in terms of sport, right? I mean, it's more or less, many would argue, our second division in every sport. If we look at football and basketball, it is almost 100% across the board. I mean, you will not play in the NBA or the NFL unless you've played college football at a very high level. That's just kind of the ticket of entry, so I think there is some value there. And I think there is also value there because, as we talked about earlier in this interview, is that many of these kids aren't going to make it professionally, whether it's whatever sport we're talking about, soccer, but whatever sport. And they're going to need something else to fall back on and rely on. And in many cases, these kids can go to university, hopefully get some scholarship money because they're good at their sport, and hopefully graduate with a degree. And if they don't make it pro, no problem. At least they have a degree and they can enter the workforce and give themselves a fighting chance to have an opportunity to, get a job and make some money and have a successful life. So I think there's quality there, but I would be critical of let's say our university system specifically on the soccer side. I won't talk about the other sports because I still think there is a pretty vast lack of quality at the college and university just from a playing level. And I have firsthand, in many different universities, see players who are being mismanaged, who aren't being put into, I would say, healthy team training and athletic environments. And I think it's an area that we can and we should absolutely improve on in the United States because it's an incredible platform, again, for young athletes to transition from a youth athlete to hopefully a professional athlete at some point. But it's a really great medium to take these athletes, have them for 4 or 5 years in a controlled environment, at a really important stage of their life where they can get an education, they can be in a new environment, they can be with new people, they can be in a team where they're fully involved and ingrained in the culture. It really is a special thing here in the United States to play a college sport. But I think, again, from the soccer front, it needs to be vastly improved and adapted to catch up with the level of the international game. I think there are only a couple schools where I would say that the level is really, I would say, adequate or at the level or at the standard it should be, based on my expectations. You look at schools like, for example, Stanford University, Clemson University, maybe a couple universities where you go, wow, okay, they really have a very structured, organized environment. They have a good culture within the team. They have a nice playing vision, so on and so forth. If we look more broadly at the college structure itself, what you're touching on, for example, unlimited substitutions. I think many of us who watch the game and are students of the game, we would say this is chaos, right? Just changing players almost as much as you want. And there are some details. Okay, you take one player out in the first half, he cannot re-enter in the first half, but he can come back on the second half. And then in the second half, you can take him out, you can put him in one more time, but if you take him out again, he's finished for the game. It's like, what is this? Who came up with these rules? And what ends up happening is when you have something to that effect, let's just talk about the substitution rule. You're now allowing the game to be played at a lightning fast speed for 90 minutes. Oh, you're tired? Come off. Put the next guy on. He's going to run. Oh, you're tired? Come off. Put the next guy on. He's going to run. And you don't prepare players how to manage a game over the course of 90 minutes, right? You don't create a flow within the game. You can't, the only really structure or tactics that you can develop is to run and high press and play direct, because that's what you're going to be playing against 9 times out of 10. So you look at it from that perspective, and it has a very long way to go. But only a few changes could make a big difference. When I went abroad compared to, my time playing in college, when I went to Italy, I stepped into an environment where I just felt physically, I can handle this. This is no problem as an athlete. But tactically and technically, I was going, wow, these players are so far ahead of me. I was like, these guys are moving into spaces and thinking of ideas and combining with each other faster than I would have ever thought of. I was only thinking, get the ball, go forward, and run. And I say to people all the time, I think, or I know, I learned more in my two and a half years in Italy than I did in my 19 years previous in the United States in terms of soccer education. If we talk specifically, let's say, about the university system, maybe it's something to that effect. A few rule changes, again, just to bring it more in line with FIFA standards and the international game, I think would then naturally force programs, coaches to adapt and to adjust. And now there's a little bit more of a thought process. When do I make substitutions? How do I make substitutions? What qualities am I looking for in the player I'm bringing on? What qualities do I have in the player who's on the field? Does that change how I play? Does that change my tactics, my system, my formation? Just one little change would lead to all those questions. I think the other piece, if we just look from a coaching education perspective, because at the end of the day, We are the ones who are leading these athletes at any level, whether it be the young kids or a college or professional player. I think we have to not only educate ourselves more in the game and how it's played and different variations of the game and different things to consider, but also in terms of how we lead these young athletes, similar to what we talked about previously. Can we ask more questions than give answers, right? Can we have reasoning or thought for everything we do? I can't tell you how many times over the course of my life I've been playing in a game or coaching in a game, and let's say the other team is losing 1-0 with 10 minutes left, and all of a sudden the coach will start screaming, put 3 in the back, change the lineup, put 3 in the back, we need to attack more. And I just, maybe critically, but I'm thinking, I wonder if they've ever trained this, or if this coach is just thinking, oh, well, if I change from 4 backs to 3 backs, that means I'm going to have one more attacker, which means we're going to attack more. But what ends up happening is, because the players have never played with 3 backs before, they have no idea what to do. And so they end up playing with 5, and then they're more defensive, and it's like chaos. And I even ask players, I'll be like, hey, listen, do you guys ever train 3 backs? And they go, no. And I go, well, then what was the idea between switching from a 4 back to a 3 back? And they go, I don't know. So that's a problem. You need to have a reason why for everything you do. And you need to have a way to convey the message and teach the message. And I think that comes from again, more education, a more thoughtful process in terms of how we plan and organize things. And that's only one specific example. But I think generally speaking, the more you know, the less you know, which makes you humble, and it makes you ask more questions, and it makes you look at things maybe through a slightly different lens, which helps you grow. Yeah, I think it's probably generally something we touched on previously, which is maybe better people off the field make better people on the field. I mean, I think we talk, let's say generally within my team, we have, just let's say in possession, we have a few principles that are very specific and set within our team. We want width, we want height, we want runs in behind, we want support underneath. Those are some main principles within our team when we're in possession. But let's talk specifically about support, right? When I think about support, I think about, okay, if my center back plays into my 9, then support would be the 2 center mids underneath to support him to play underneath if he wants to, right? Or is it players in wide area supporting wide if he wants to combine with them? That's support on the field. But let's also talk about support off the field. How can we talk about supporting the 9 in possession as a center mid if off the field the players are being mean with each other, being rude to each other, cutting each other down, insulting each other? Nah, that wasn't good, that was bad, you suck, whatever. That's lack of support, right? So do we need to create a relationship between the players first, and an understanding of values within our team of like, you have to support each other, you have to build each other up, right? You have to hold people accountable. You have to, when your player is struggling, you have to take responsibility for your teammate and help him and build him up and support him. That's support, right? But then when you have that, when you've constructed those values within the team, then supporting your 9 when he receives the ball and you're there to support him physically to play, that's very easy. The hard part is the piece off the field. It's putting your ego aside, and it's constantly reminding yourself that you don't know anything. You don't know anything. I mean, the reality is the moment you believe that you have all the answers is the moment that you're going to start failing and dropping and just getting worse at what you do. And I think, I've spent time. I've gone back to Italy on a couple of occasions. On one occasion, I spent the week with Roberto Breda, who was at Virtus Entella for about 2 years in Serie B, and I just spent the week with him. I stayed at his apartment with his family. We spent 24 hours a day together. We went to training, we went to games, and we would just talk. And I just spent the whole week watching what he did and asking questions and putting myself in the background and basically saying, this isn't about me. I'm here as a guest. I'm here to learn. I'm here to understand. And it's one of those reminders that, again, very little, right? You're in an environment now where you're seeing all these things for the first time. And I think it's humbling, and it helps remind you again why you're doing it. And just on the same side of that, I don't need to go all the way to Italy with a professional team and a high level coach to learn something and get better. Sometimes I go and I'll see just even the little kids playing, the 4 and 5 year olds doing some stuff, and one coach is running them around playing games, and I'm watching them going, oh, there's some really good stuff here. Maybe I could use this with my team, right? Maybe this is something I could tie into what I'm doing, and I learned something there. I remember when I was coaching at Howard University, I used to go watch the volleyball team practice all the time. And I would sit there and watch the volleyball team practice, and I'd be like, well, why do they do things this way? They never warm up. They never do what I would do. They never, he uses different words than I use. Why do they do that? And it would just help me think of different ideas that maybe I could bring to training or to my environment. And also would question myself to be like, well, why don't I do that? Why don't I talk that way? Why don't I structure my training that way? So yeah, I mean, you have to always be learning. I think if you're not learning, you're dying more or less. So communication. I think it's maybe finding that balance of humility and confidence, and remaining, I think, even keel, right? Not getting too high with the highs or too low with the lows. I think maybe those are the three things that I hope that I do well and convey to my team, because I think that's how I want them to act, right? I don't want them to win a game and think they're the best team in the world, but I also don't want them to lose a game and think they're the worst. I want them to stay focused on what the bigger plan is here. I want them to be confident, but I don't want them to be engulfed by their ego or arrogant, right? There has to be a balance. And I also don't want them to be, shrinking and nervous, or lack confidence. And I think again, you get all of that by as a coach carrying yourself to the same standard and projecting that ideology or that message. And I think the last piece where I think that I have a strength, or I think that I do well, is that I try to just treat the kids like humans. I try to treat them like adults, right? I mean, these kids, okay, they might be 13, 14, 15 years old, but you're 13, 14, 15 years old. Your whole life, people have only been talking down to you, been talking at you, right? You're at school every day. You're sitting in the chair looking up at the teacher, right? When you're at home, your parents are telling you what to do. So I like to try to create the relationship within my team that, like, we're equals, right? Of course, there's a power structure, but we're equals. I'm gonna treat you with the respect that I would of any of my peers. But at the same time, there's responsibility there, and they have to then reciprocate that. They have to carry themselves to that maturity. But 99% of the time, they take that and they own it and they appreciate that, and it makes them feel empowered. So it's I think that's something that I find very important, and it's something that I think that I do well. Something that I've talked about for a number of years now. I mean, even when I was doing my B license and then finishing my A license just recently, was managing games. I think it's something that I've struggled with over years, of trying to find the balance of, doing what's necessary in a moment, whether that's making an important substitution or an important tactical change based on maybe an area that we're struggling with within the game, or maybe it's based on something that the opponent, a difficulty the opponent is giving us, or maybe if a player is struggling himself, right? Maybe it's a substitution you have to make, or a tactical adjustment. And that's something that for a very long time, I think I struggled with, because I would question it very much. I would say, this guy, he's having a hard time today. Maybe we need to make a change, but he's also somebody who, if he gets one chance, he might score. And then you hesitate. And there's two sides to that, because if you pull the player off and don't manage it appropriately, maybe that player starts to lose confidence, right? Maybe the player starts to question himself or even question you. You know, Or if you leave him on and you don't bring the player on from the bench, now that player is going, well, why am I not playing more? He's struggling. Why aren't I getting my opportunity? Um, or if you make a tactical adjustment in a moment, and let's say you end up losing the game, now do people look at you and they question, well, why did you make that change? You made the change, but it didn't work. So do you know what you're doing? Clearly, no, because you made the wrong move. So I think the issue for me was being able to deal with those pressures, deal with what was happening on the field, and taking it all together, filtering it, and then making a clear decision and being okay with it. And good, bad, win, lose, success or failure, just being okay with it. And I think that's something that I still struggle with and I'm working on, because I think with no risk, there's no reward. But you also have to understand that risk is risk. And if it doesn't work out, you are going to have to deal with the repercussions. And that's okay, but it takes practice. Just like failure takes practice. It's just, you learn and you get better at it. And that's something that I'm still working on. They're definitely different challenges than they were a decade ago. I think a decade ago, we were even still talking about trying to get more players more involved, trying to get more exposure for the sport here, trying to continue to develop the MLS, trying to figure out what the player pathway looked like in this country. Before, it was pretty much everybody goes to college. And now it's very much changing through our academy system and through exposure that we're getting at a professional level here, both domestically and internationally. I think the next decade, we're probably moving more into a space of maybe catering more to our top talent. I think if you look at, let's just say, the US men's national team right this moment, the number of young American players, let's say under the age of 25, under the age of 23, who are playing abroad at some of the top clubs in the world. I mean, we would have never imagined this 10 years ago, but that's the moment we're in now. So now the conversation is that the best pathway for their development? Is that the best pathway for young American players? For example, let's say Brandon Arrington, who just got sold from Philadelphia Union to Red Bull Salzburg. Benny would say that was the best transition for him. He hit a level where he was topping out at the Philadelphia Union. He needed the next step as 17, 18 years old. Is a very good transition for him, and it looks great for US soccer. It looks great for the league, so on and so forth. Is that going to be the status quo now going forward for young American players who are the top talent? Are we looking at each of our top 15, 16, 17-year-olds in MLS academies in this country? Are we figuring out a better way to get them into first teams in the MLS and keep their talent here? And if we are keeping the talent here, is it truly a conducive environment that suits their environment best? Or do they need to transition on to the European level and the European stage, where I think in many cases, let's say in some of the top leagues in the world, we would argue, yeah, of course, that's the pinnacle of the game for us, worldwide. But it's also difficult to watch your talent walk out the door and go to a different place, right? It's something you're proud of, but also you're like, I wish they could here. But you have to do what's best for the player and what's best for their bigger development. So I think that's maybe the conversation and the challenge we're looking at the next decade. But that's a great challenge to be facing. A great challenge. I think it's what we talked about previously. Again, I think I would be happy just with players calling me 10 years down the road and checking in to see how I'm doing. That's it. It was probably two people. It was probably my mom, who took me everywhere growing up, took me to every soccer game and every soccer practice. And I remember, even from my youngest ages, she would always tell me, see the ball in the goal, which was very, this very early elementary visualization process, right? And now we talk about, again, mental preparation for athletes, and everything is visualize it, see it happening, so on and so forth. And I remember, this was 25 years ago when I was 7 years old, and she's telling me, see the ball in the goal. And I'm like, shut up, Mom. Like, what are you talking about? Leave me alone, But it was actually great advice, and it's something that I still even use now. And I tell my players all the time now, like, visualize what you're going to do, right? And she was also somebody who, I remember at all of my games, all the parents would be sitting together in, one area. She would be sitting all the way across by herself. And I would ask her, I'd be like, why don't you go sit with the other parents? And she'd be like, I'm not here to talk to them. She's like, I'm here to watch you play. And so that always meant a lot to me. That was huge for me. Outside of her, there were certainly professional athletes that I looked up to. I mean, guys like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was always somebody who I idolized. I still have his book on my shelf, a book called I Can't Accept Not Trying, which is only this big, right? And it's maybe one sentence on every page. And my mom actually gave it to me for my birthday when I was only 6 years old. She still has written inside of it. But outside of that, I would say my old coach, Emile Mbu, who was the captain for Cameroon in 2 World Cups in 1990 in Italia and 1994 in the United States. He's somebody who completely changed the way I looked at the game. He started coaching me when I was 15 years old. He had come to one of my high school games, and I was playing for a different club team at the time. In the US, you play both club and for your school. And he came to my high school game and he goes, I want you to play for my team. And I was like, okay, no problem. Right. Because I knew who he was. And so I started playing for him, and I was 15 years old. I couldn't juggle the ball 10 times. Like my technique was a disaster. The only thing I ever did was get the ball, kick it downfield, and run. That was it. That was all I knew how to do. And he very much changed the way I saw the game. He made me handle the ball more. He made me develop more mastery of the ball. Different types of passes, different types of dribbling. He wanted me to keep the ball more than kicking it. He wanted me to use the ball more than just running with it. And he just changed my perception of the game and how I played it as well. And he's somebody to this day who I was talking to him yesterday. We talk all the time. He's very much a mentor for me and somebody I've remained very close with. So yeah, probably those two. I think it can be defined in one picture. And it's actually a picture I posted on my Instagram page, which was, it was one of my former players who I coached for 4 years at Howard University. He came here from Jamaica, a kid named Joel Cunningham, great player, very good player, even better person. And I watched him kind of grow from this young kid who came into a new country, a new environment, a new team, and a team that was honestly in a very difficult place. And as a freshman, he was given the captain's armband, which literally does not happen in any sport in college athletics, to be made a captain as a freshman. And it came with a lot of pressure that I'm not sure he was prepared for. So anyways, he went through these 4 years to Howard University, which were 4 very, very difficult years, tied with a lot of losing and a lot of challenges, and a lot of adversity. And it was after those 4 years, I have a team that I still play for, a men's league team with a bunch of my friends. We play on Sunday nights. We have a great time. It's a good group of guys. It's nice to just play and forget about everything else. And he came out to play with us. And he had finished his 4 years at university. He was, I believe he was about to go to Iceland to join a team over there or go on trial. And he just came to play with us. And I took a picture with him afterwards, just the two of us, And I was just kind of like, this is a very cool moment for me, where it's like this kid who I've coached these 4 years, he's now, he's out in the real world by himself, and we're just equals now. It's not coach player anymore. It's just friends. And maybe that moment or moments like that, I think that's what it's all about. I would say no. I think there are, of course, things I could have done better. I think there are, of course, experiences I could have that maybe could have been more positive. But does that matter? Would that change who I am now? Would that really serve any purpose? I spent 5 years at Howard University losing. I mean, my first year there as a volunteer assistant, we won 1 game. My second year there, we won 0 games. And this is a 20-game season. My third year there, we won one game. My fourth year, we won two games. My fifth year, we won five, which was like, wow. Um, but I spent 5 years at a program just losing and just being beaten on every single game and just being in an environment where it was like, you maybe had hope for the first 5 minutes of a game, and then you would just be like, oh, this is a disaster. And it was every single game. And it was just demoralizing. And I had a lot of people around me who were asking me, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you there? Why don't you go coach at Georgetown, where they're winning national championships in Washington, D.C.? Why don't you go to University of Maryland, half an hour away, where they're winning national championships? All these different things. First off, it's not as easy as just walking in the door. But, you know, I don't know. I told them, I was like, maybe this is something bigger, right? Maybe there's a bigger reason for this. It is what it is right now. I just need to find a way to make it work. And it was an extremely difficult, challenging 4 or 5 years, 5 years of my time there. But I wouldn't change any of it, because what prepares you better for life than losing all the time? Like, that, it's brutal, it's demoralizing, but it's like, once you've been through that, I mean, winning is like, when we win now, it's like, wow. It's like really special. So it's part of the process. And no, so I don't think I would change anything. I think it's you can always learn and grow and get better from things, but you shouldn't look back hoping you can change things. You can't change the past. Just move forward, move on to the next thing. It would be to put your ego away. It would be to be more humble, realize you don't know anything. I remember when I did my first coaching course, it was my license here in Maryland. And I remember doing the course and thinking, I don't need this. I'm like, I already know everything. I played Division I college here. I played in Italy. I'm here with some parents. They don't know anything. Like, I know everything. And I remember doing the course and walking away from it being like, oh, okay, well, I got some good ideas there. I never thought about even structuring my practices at all. I would just go and do what I want. So I was like, oh, okay, well, there were some good ideas. And then I did my D license, and there were two parts. I did the first half one weekend, and then I didn't do the second half. I just forgot about it or something. And I got a phone call from Stephen Constantine, who, through a very long story, had become a friend of mine. At that point, he was the head coach for the India men's national team. Why I was friends with him or why he wanted to talk to me, I don't know. But he called me one day randomly just to catch up. And he asked me how I was doing. And he was like, so how are things going with the coaching course? And I was like, oh, I stopped doing it. US soccer sucks. They don't know anything. Like, it's a waste of time. I already know everything. And he like tore into me on the phone, and he was like, who do you think you are? What are you doing? You don't know anything. If you ever applied for a job where I was coaching, I would crumple up your resume and throw it in the trash. Like, you haven't put in any of the work. And he went on for like 10 minutes. And I was like, wow, he's right. I don't know anything. And who am I to think that I can just not do any of my licenses and just walk in the door wherever I want and impress everybody with my knowledge? I don't know anything. I haven't done anything. Right. So that was something that I look back on. It was a very important moment, because I hung up the phone. I went on the computer. I signed up for the D license course. I finished it. And then every year after that, just boom, 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 trying to get all my licenses and do my work and learn more. And that was a very humbling experience for me that I needed. And I still very much appreciate. And I message him at times and I let him know how I'm doing. And I'm like, hey, I finished my B license. I finished my A license. Thank you for kicking me in the ass to do that. Right. But I think that would be my advice to myself. Take a step back. You don't know anything. Put your ego away. Dogs, no question. I have 4. Hot. Lost in translation. Oh man, that's tough. Right now, because it touches very close to me, I think, is In the Blood by John Mayer. Oof. Ah, you know what? I would maybe curling because I have no idea what's happening there with the sweeping of the ice and the thing, whatever. But you know what? At the same time, like it's kind of like golf. If you can take a nap to it and wake up and it's still happening, there's something really to value there. So, maybe boring is good. Oh man, what would it be? Probably just to transport myself from one place to the other, so I could just cut out all this travel time. I drive like from home to practice, it's like an hour, and then we have games like 3 hours away. It'd be so much easier if I could just like hit the button and just be there, not waste any time. I think when I was younger, I would probably like to say like a cheetah or a leopard because I was obsessed with being fast. Doesn't mean I was fast, but I was obsessed with being fast and I really wanted to be fast. I looked up to guys like Usain Bolt and I was like, man, that's amazing. What would it be like? Um, that's tough. Maybe let's say a lion. How about a lion? That's an easy one because I'm very competitive. I'm tenacious, but I think maybe like a male lion. Sometimes I do like to take a nap and just relax. Maybe maybe David Beckham. He's a good one. He was somebody I idolized growing up. I was like, this guy is the coolest guy in the world. He's got great hair and he's so good at soccer. Like, what more could you want? So that done. That's an easy one. Hopefully, a soccer coach. What more could you want? Like, if I can go and sit on a bench and watch games and to be around what I love, like, what more could you want? Even the days I'm not working, I end up on a field watching a game that I have nothing to do with. But it's just, what more could you want in life? Yeah, I think it's I would say take risk, put yourself in uncomfortable positions. If you are comfortable, then you're probably ready for a change. And say yes to people. If people ask you to do something or go somewhere or try something, say yes, because you just never know what comes of it, or the relationships you build, or the network you develop, or a new passion that you find out. And I think if you end up just saying no to people, then you limit yourself and you're going to live your life in a box and you're not going to go anywhere. So say yes.